I stood in the back of that auditorium, watching my ex-wife smile for the cameras like she'd carried our son through every sleepless night, every tutoring session, every scholarship application. She wore designer everything, her new husband's arm around her waist, while reporters scribbled notes about her sacrifice and dedication. I was just the janitor in the corner, the one nobody noticed, the one she left because I wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't successful enough, wasn't enough. But then the dean stepped to the microphone, cleared his throat, and said a name I wasn't expecting. Mine. What happened next silenced that entire room. This isn't just about a graduation. It's about years of quiet work, hidden sacrifices, and the moment when everything I'd done in the shadows finally came to light. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because what unfolded on that stage, nobody saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I've always been an early riser. There's something about the hours before dawn that belong only to you, when the world hasn't woken up yet to make its demands. That morning started like every other for the past 6 years. My alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., and I was out the door by 5 o'clock. Driving through empty streets toward Belmont Technical Institute, where I worked as the head custodian. The campus was beautiful in the early morning light. Old brick buildings with ivy creeping up the walls, perfectly manicured lawns that I helped maintain, stone pathways that had seen generations of students walk across them toward their futures. I parked my maintenance truck in the back lot, the same spot I'd been using since I started, and grabbed my keys. 37 buildings. Each one with its own personality, its own quirks. I knew them all. I started my rounds in the science building, checking thermostats, emptying trash bins, making sure everything was ready before the first classes began. The chemistry lab on the 3rd floor had a leaky faucet that I'd been meaning to fix properly, not just tape up like I'd been doing. I made a mental note to grab the parts from the supply room later. By 6:30, I was in the library, my favorite building on campus. The smell of old books and floor polish mixed together in a way that felt like home. I'd spent more time in this building than anywhere else, not just cleaning, but reading, learning, understanding. The head librarian, Mrs. Pemberton, always left me notes about books she thought I'd enjoy. She was one of the few people on campus who treated me like I was more than just the person who emptied the wastebaskets. I moved through the aisles with my cart, straightening chairs, wiping down study tables. A few early bird students were already camped out in the corner, laptops open, coffee cups growing cold beside them. They never looked up. To them, I was invisible, part of the building itself. That was fine. I preferred it that way. My son Trevor was one of those students. Not this morning, but most mornings. He'd be in the engineering section, working on projects that I couldn't fully understand but was endlessly proud of. He didn't know I watched him sometimes, standing in the doorway of whatever study room he'd claimed, seeing the concentration on his face, the same expression he'd had as a kid working on Lego sets at our kitchen table. That kitchen table was long gone now, sold along with everything else when Victoria left. Victoria Caldwell. Even thinking her name felt like touching something sharp. We'd met in college, both of us young and stupid, and convinced we'd figured out life. I was studying architecture then, had dreams of designing buildings that would stand for centuries. She was pre-law, already calculating her path to the top. For a while, it worked. We made sense together. Then Trevor came along, and everything shifted. Not in a bad way, just in a real way. Babies don't care about your 5-year plan. They need you now, in the middle of the night, in the middle of your carefully constructed life. I adjusted. Victoria didn't. She finished law school while I put my degree on hold. Someone had to be home. Someone had to make sure Trevor ate something other than goldfish crackers. Someone had to notice when he developed that ear infection that wouldn't go away. I told myself it was temporary. I'd go back, finish my degree, pick up where I left off. Except life doesn't pause. My father got sick. Cancer, the kind that moves fast and doesn't negotiate. I spent 6 months helping my mother take care of him, driving back and forth between our apartment and their house in Pinewood Heights, trying to be everywhere at once. Victoria's career was taking off. She'd made junior partner at Caldwell & Associates, the firm her uncle had founded. She was working 60-hour weeks, traveling for depositions, building the life she'd always wanted. I was changing bedpans and reading bedtime stories and fixing the washing machine at 11 p.m. because we couldn't afford to call a repairman. When my father died, he left me nothing but debt and a toolbox. The debt I handled. The toolbox I kept. That's when Victoria sat me down at that kitchen table, the one we'd bought at a yard sale and refinished together, and told me she couldn't do this anymore. Not the marriage, not the life we'd built, not me. She'd met someone. Another lawyer, someone who understood her ambition, someone who could match her trajectory. His name was Preston Whitmore III, and he had family money that went back 4 generations. The divorce was quick. She had lawyers, good ones. I had a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She got the house, the car, most of the savings. I got weekends with Trevor and a 1-bedroom apartment in Ashford Commons that smelled like the previous tenant's cat. The custody arrangement was clear. She'd provide the stable environment, the private schools, the opportunities. I'd get him every other weekend and alternating holidays. Child support was set based on my current income, which was 0 at that point. I needed work fast. The custodian position at Belmont Technical Institute paid $32,000 a year with benefits. It wasn't architecture. It wasn't designing buildings that would last centuries. But it was steady. And it came with one benefit that changed everything. Employee dependents could attend Belmont tuition-free. I took the job the same week the divorce was finalized. Trevor was 12 then, already showing signs of the brilliant mind he'd inherited from both of us. He loved taking things apart, understanding how they worked, building them back better. I knew he'd need college, and I knew I couldn't afford to send him anywhere on a custodian's salary. Victoria enrolled him in Holloway Preparatory Academy, one of those schools where the parking lot looked like a luxury car dealership. She made sure everyone knew she was funding his education, paying for his tutors, providing the, quote, foundation for success. She wasn't wrong. She did provide those things. What she didn't provide were the late-night conversations about why his physics homework mattered. Or the weekends spent building model bridges in my tiny apartment, testing their weight capacity with canned goods from my pantry. Or the quiet encouragement when he doubted himself, when the pressure of being Victoria Caldwell's son felt like too much to carry. I finished my rounds in the library and moved on to the administration building. The dean's office was on the 2nd floor, a corner suite with windows that overlooked the main quad. I'd cleaned that office 1,000 times, had seen the photos on the walls, the diplomas, the awards. Dean Patricia Blackwood had built Belmont's engineering program from nothing into one of the most respected in the region. She was always kind to me, always remembered my name. Sometimes she'd still be working when I came through at night, and we'd chat about books or campus improvements or her grandkids. She never treated me like I was less than because I pushed a mop for a living. I was wiping down her conference table when I saw it. The program for tomorrow's graduation ceremony, sitting on her desk. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I flipped through the pages, looking for Trevor's name. There it was, Trevor Caldwell Whitmore, summa cum laude, mechanical engineering, Rhodes Scholarship finalist. My hands shook slightly as I set the program down. Tomorrow, after 6 years of early mornings and evening shifts, of watching from a distance while pretending I wasn't watching, of being the weekend dad who lived in a tiny apartment and drove a truck that barely passed inspection. Tomorrow my son would graduate. And I'd be there, in my custodian uniform, watching from the back of the auditorium where the staff stood during ceremonies. That was fine. I didn't need to be front and center. I just needed to see his face when they handed him that diploma. I locked up the administration building and headed back to my truck. The sun was fully up now, campus coming alive with students hurrying to classes. None of them saw me. I was just part of the scenery, the guy who made sure their toilets flushed and their classrooms were clean. I drove home to my apartment, showered, made myself a sandwich I didn't really want. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. I needed to be ready. But I wasn't ready for what Victoria had planned. Nobody was. Graduation day arrived with clear skies and perfect weather, the kind of day that felt designed for achievement and celebration. I'd requested the morning off, first time in 6 years I'd called in, and my supervisor hadn't questioned it. Everyone knew my son was graduating. Even the invisible people had lives outside these buildings. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I put on the only suit I owned, the same navy one I'd worn to my father's funeral. It was outdated, the shoulders a bit too wide for current fashion, but it was clean and pressed. I'd ironed it the night before, taking my time, making sure the creases were sharp. Details mattered. The ceremony started at 10 a.m. I arrived at 9 o'clock, wanting to find a good spot before the crowd filled in. The main auditorium held 3,000 people, with overflow seating in the adjacent halls where they'd set up video screens. I'd helped arrange those chairs earlier in the week, had made sure the sound system was working properly, had done my part to make sure this day went smoothly. The auditorium was already filling up, families in their finest clothes, carrying flowers and balloons, cameras ready. The energy was electric, that particular mix of pride and relief that comes with finishing something difficult. I recognized that feeling. I'd lived with it for 6 years. I found a spot along the side wall, near the back, where the staff usually stood. From here, I could see the stage clearly. The podium was centered, flanked by rows of chairs for faculty and honored guests. The graduates would enter from the left, process down the center aisle, fill the front sections. I'd memorized the program. Trevor would be in the third row, seat 17. Families continued to stream in. I watched them, these polished people, with their confidence and their expensive watches, their easy laughter and casual touches. This was their world. They belonged here. Their sons and daughters had earned these degrees, and they'd supported them every step of the way, in ways both visible and acknowledged. Then I saw her. Victoria entered through the main doors, like she was walking a red carpet. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, her hair styled in that effortless way that requires an hour with a professional. Beside her was Preston, tall and distinguished in a charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly groomed. They looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread about successful couples. Behind them came Preston's parents, the Whitmore seniors, old money that had built half of this city's historic district. And trailing the group was a photographer, an actual professional photographer, already snapping candid shots of the family's arrival. I pressed myself flatter against the wall. They made their way to the front section, the area reserved for VIP families. Of course they had reserved seats. Probably donated enough to the university to get their names on a bench somewhere. Victoria settled into her chair like she was claiming a throne, Preston's hand resting on her shoulder, proprietary and proud. The photographer positioned himself in the aisle, getting angles. More families filled in around them. I noticed some of them recognizing Victoria, leaning over to shake her hand to congratulate her. She smiled graciously, accepting their praise like it was her due. I caught fragments of conversation. "Your son is remarkable. You must be so proud. All your sacrifice has paid off." Victoria nodded, placed her hand over her heart in a gesture of humble acknowledgement. "It hasn't been easy," she said, her voice carrying in the acoustics. "I knew so well, but when you love your son, you do whatever it takes." My jaw tightened. The music started, that processional march that signals the beginning. Everyone stood. The faculty entered first, their academic robes colorful and medieval, hoods denoting their degrees and institutions. Dean Blackwood led them, her bearing dignified and warm. She took her place on the stage, and the graduates began their entrance. I scanned the line of young faces, all of them trying to look serious and failing, their excitement breaking through in grins and whispered comments to each other. Then I saw Trevor. He looked so much older than the 12-year-old who'd sat on my apartment floor building model rockets. Taller, his shoulders broader, his face more angular, but he had the same expression he'd always worn when he was proud of himself, that slight smile that said he knew he'd done something worth doing. My throat tightened. The graduates filled the front sections, a sea of black robes and squared caps. The music ended. Everyone sat. Dean Blackwood approached the podium. Distinguished guests, faculty, families, and most importantly, our graduates. She began. Her voice was strong, clear. Today we celebrate not just the achievement of a degree, but the years of dedication, sacrifice, and growth that brought these remarkable young people to this moment. The speech continued, the usual themes of achievement and potential, of doors opening and futures beginning. I'd heard variations of this speech dozens of times from my position along these walls. It never got old. Each class was different. Each group of students had their own story. Then came the awards portion. Before the main ceremony, they recognized outstanding graduates, academic excellence, research contributions, service to the community. Names were called. Students walked across the stage to receive medallions and certificates. Families applauded. "And now," Dean Blackwood said, pausing for effect, "our Presidential Scholar Award. This honor goes to the graduating senior who has demonstrated exceptional academic achievement, innovative research, and dedication to advancing their field. This year's recipient graduated summa cum laude with a perfect 4.0 GPA, completed a senior thesis that has already been accepted for publication in the Journal of Applied Mechanics, and has been selected as a Rhodes Scholarship finalist." I straightened. I knew before she said the name. Trevor Caldwell Whitmore. The auditorium erupted in applause. Trevor stood, looking genuinely surprised, and made his way to the stage. Dean Blackwood shook his hand, placed the medallion around his neck, handed him a certificate folder. Victoria was on her feet, hands clasped in front of her, tears streaming down her face. Preston had his arm around her. The photographer was capturing every angle. People in the surrounding rows were looking at her obvious emotion, her clear pride. Someone behind her leaned forward. "You must tell us your secret. How did you raise such an accomplished young man?" Victoria wiped her eyes, laughed softly. "It takes a village," she said, "but mostly it takes showing up. Every day, even when it's hard." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Trevor returned to his seat, and the ceremony continued. Name after name. Hundreds of graduates crossing that stage. I watched them all, but I was only really seeing one. When it finally ended, when the caps were thrown and the music swelled and families rushed forward to find their graduates, I stayed where I was. I watched Victoria embrace Trevor. Watched Preston shake his hand with that firm grip successful men use to communicate approval. Watched the Whitmore grandparents offer their congratulations. The photographer orchestrated group shots. Trevor in the center, Victoria on one side, Preston on the other. The whole family arranged just so, the perfect image of success. Trevor's eyes scanned the crowd, looking for someone, looking for me. He wouldn't find me. Not in this crowd, not among these people. I was the custodian, the weekend dad, the man who'd faded into the background of his own son's life. I turned to leave, to slip out before the crowd got worse, before I had to watch any more of Victoria's performance. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned. Dean Blackwood stood there, still in her robes, her expression serious. "Austin," she said quietly. She was the only person on campus who called me by my first name. "Don't leave yet. I need you to stay." Dean Blackwood's grip on my shoulder was gentle but firm, the kind of touch that suggested this wasn't a request so much as an instruction. I glanced back at the celebrating families, at Victoria holding court near the stage, and then back at the dean. "Ma'am, I should go," I said quietly. "I'm not really supposed to be in here during the ceremony. I just wanted to watch." Her eyes, sharp behind her wire-rimmed glasses, held something I couldn't quite read. Not pity, but something close to determination. "Austin, I know you've been watching Trevor for 6 years. I've known the whole time." My stomach dropped. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. "You did more than that," she said, her voice low enough that the noise around us swallowed it before it could travel. "Come with me, please. There's something you need to see before you disappear again." She turned and walked toward a side door marked, "Faculty only," not checking to see if I'd follow. After a moment's hesitation, I did. The corridor beyond was quieter, insulated from the celebration continuing in the auditorium. Dean Blackwood moved with purpose, her robes swishing against the polished floor I'd cleaned countless times. We climbed a narrow staircase to the 3rd floor, a section of the building I rarely accessed during my regular rounds. Executive offices, boardrooms, places where decisions about the university's future were made. She stopped at a door labeled Archives and Records and pulled out a key card. The lock beeped, and she pushed the door open. Inside was a small room lined with filing cabinets and shelves of bound documents. A single desk sat in the center with a computer that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. The air smelled like old paper and dust, despite my best efforts to keep every corner of this campus clean. Dean Blackwood closed the door behind us and gestured to a chair. "Sit." I sat, feeling like a student called to the principal's office. She remained standing, her hands folded in front of her. "6 years ago," she began, "a custodian applied for a position here. His resume showed an incomplete architecture degree, a string of odd jobs, and a recent divorce. During his interview, he barely made eye contact. But he knew the answer to every question I asked about the campus infrastructure. He'd done his research, he'd walked the grounds. He'd already memorized the layout of buildings he'd never set foot in." I looked down at my hands. "I hired him," she continued, "because I recognized something. Desperation, yes, but also dedication. And when he listed his son's name as his emergency contact, I ran the usual background check we run on all employees who might interact with students." She moved to one of the filing cabinets and pulled out a folder. Not just any folder, a thick one, stuffed with papers and sticky notes, marking various sections. "Trevor Caldwell Whitmore," she said, opening it. "Enrolled in Belmont's early admission program at 16. Mother listed as primary guardian and financial sponsor. Father listed as Austin Ford. Address in Ashford Commons. Occupation listed as unemployed at time of enrollment." She pulled out a document and laid it on the desk in front of me. It was Trevor's admission file. "Do you remember filling out the employee tuition waiver?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "You said dependent tuition was part of the benefits package." "It is, but do you remember what else you signed that day?" I didn't. She pulled out another document. A form I'd filled out 6 years ago, mostly blank except for Trevor's name, my signature, and a series of boxes I'd checked without really reading the fine print. I'd been so focused on making sure Trevor could attend tuition-free that I hadn't paid attention to the rest. "This form," Dean Blackwood said, tapping it with her finger, "authorized the university to allocate your employee education benefit to your dependent, but it also included a clause that allowed you to make anonymous contributions to a supplementary scholarship fund. Do you remember setting that up?" I stared at the paper. There, in my handwriting from 6 years ago, was a checked box next to optional salary allocation for dependent scholarship support and a number, 15%. "I thought that was just part of the tuition waiver," I said slowly. "No," she said gently. "The tuition waiver covered his classes. This was extra. For 6 years, you've been directing 15% of your salary into a fund that covered Trevor's lab fees, his textbooks, his research materials. You didn't have to do that. The waiver would have been enough for basic tuition." I tried to do the math in my head. 15% of $32,000 a year, spread across 6 years. That was almost $30,000. Money I hadn't really noticed leaving my paychecks because I'd been so focused on making sure Trevor had what he needed. "There's more," Dean Blackwood said. She pulled out a series of printed emails, all addressed to various department heads, all sent from an account I didn't recognize at first. Then I saw the signature, A. Ford, Facilities Management. The emails were about Trevor. Questions about which professors were best for advanced mechanics, requests for information about research opportunities, inquiries about graduate school placement rates. I'd sent them all late at night from my work computer, never really thinking about the fact that they were being received, read, and filed. "You advocated for him," she said, quietly, "without ever making it about you. When Professor Hendricks was considering students for her advanced robotics research team, you sent her an email detailing Trevor's aptitude for problem solving. You didn't sign it as his father, you signed it as a staff member who'd observed a promising student." My face burned. I just wanted to make sure he had opportunities. "You did more than that." She pulled out another document, this one more official looking. A letter on university letterhead dated 3 months ago. When Trevor was nominated for the Rhodes Scholarship, part of the application process included gathering letters of recommendation from people who could speak to his character and work ethic. His mother submitted one. So did Preston Whitmore, using his connections to add weight. But there was a third letter, one that the selection committee specifically mentioned as being the most compelling. She handed it to me. It was typed on university stationery, signed by Dean Patricia Blackwood herself. But as I read it, I recognized phrases I'd said to her during our late-night conversations when she was still working and I was making my rounds. Observations about Trevor's dedication, stories about seeing him in the library at 2 a.m. working on projects, details about how he helped other students understand difficult concepts. "You wrote this," I said, looking up at her. "I compiled it," she corrected, "from 6 years of conversations with you. Every time you mentioned Trevor, every story you told me about his weekend visits, every proud moment you shared when you thought no one important was listening, I was taking notes. Because I knew someday it would matter." I couldn't speak. She pulled out one final document. A financial record showing scholarship allocations for Trevor's entire time at Belmont. The employee-dependent tuition waiver covered about 60% of his total costs. Another 25% came from the fund I'd been contributing to without fully realizing it. The remaining 15% came from something labeled Blackwood Discretionary Merit Fund. "You paid part of his education," I said slowly, looking at her. "I redirected some resources," she said, "money that would have gone to other initiatives. Because I believed Trevor deserved a chance to succeed without being buried in debt, and I believed his father deserved to know that his sacrifices weren't invisible." The room felt too small suddenly. 6 years of early mornings and late nights, of living in a cramped apartment and driving a truck that barely ran, of watching from a distance while Victoria took credit for every achievement. It wasn't invisible. At least not to everyone. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked. Dean Blackwood closed the folder and looked at me with an expression that was part sympathy, part steel. "Because in about 10 minutes, there's going to be a reception in the faculty hall. Victoria Caldwell Whitmore has arranged for several local media outlets to attend. She's planning to give interviews about the challenges of raising a successful student, the importance of parental involvement, the sacrifices she made." My jaw tightened. "And I'm going to introduce you to those reporters," she continued, "not as the custodian, as Trevor's father. The man who actually made sure he could attend this university. The man who worked 2 jobs on weekends to cover what the scholarships didn't. The man who spent 6 years being erased from his own son's story." I stood up, shaking my head. "I can't do that. Trevor doesn't need that kind of drama today. He worked too hard." "Trevor," she said firmly, "has been looking for you in that auditorium for the last 20 minutes. I saw him. He's not looking for Victoria or Preston or the photographer. He's looking for you. And when he doesn't find you, he's going to assume you didn't come." Again. The word hit like a physical blow. "I'm here," I said quietly. "I've always been here." "Then show him," she said. "Stop hiding in the corners of his life and step into the light for once. You earned that right." Dean Blackwood didn't wait for my answer. She picked up the folder, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle and looked back at me. "The reception starts in 5 minutes. I'll be there. The choice to join me is yours, but Austin, understand something. Victoria has spent 6 years rewriting history. If you don't show up to correct the record, that false version becomes the only version that matters." She left, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that echoed in the small room. I stood there surrounded by filing cabinets and decades of university records, feeling the weight of 6 years pressing down on my shoulders. Through the small window, I could see families streaming across the quad toward the faculty hall, a beautiful stone building with tall windows and a reputation for hosting the university's most important events. I'd cleaned that building hundreds of times, knew every corner, every hidden closet, every squeaky floorboard. But I'd never attended an event there. Staff didn't get invited to faculty receptions. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting nothing important. Instead, there was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Dad, where are you? I thought you'd be here." My hands shook slightly as I typed back. "I'm here. Congratulations, Trevor. I'm so proud of you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Can we talk? Alone? There's something I need to tell you." Before I could respond, another message came through. "Meet me in the engineering library, 2nd floor, the study room we used to go to." The engineering library. 6 years ago, when Trevor first started at Belmont, I'd shown him that building during one of his weekend visits to my apartment. We'd spent hours there, me helping him with calculus problems I had to relearn myself, him explaining physics concepts that made my head spin. It became our place, the neutral ground between his two worlds. I texted back, "Give me 20 minutes." I left the archives room and took the back stairwell, the one students didn't know about, the one that let me move through campus unseen. Old habits. The engineering library was on the far side of campus, a modern building with glass walls and open spaces designed to encourage collaboration. I'd always liked it, even though cleaning all that glass was a nightmare. I entered through the maintenance entrance, took the service elevator to the second floor, and emerged into a quiet corridor lined with small study rooms. Most were empty now, everyone still at the ceremony or the reception. I found the room Trevor meant, the one in the corner with the view of the reflecting pool outside. He was already there, still in his graduation robes, the presidential scholar medallion around his neck. He'd taken off his cap, and his hair was slightly messed up from wearing it. When he saw me, his expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for me to read them all. "You came in your suit," he said. I looked down at my outdated navy suit, suddenly self-conscious. "It's the only one I have." "It's the same one from Grandpa's funeral." "Yeah." He nodded slowly, then gestured to the chairs around the study table. We sat across from each other, the same way we'd sat hundreds of times before, working through homework problems or just talking about life. "Mom's giving interviews right now," Trevor said. "About how she raised me, how she sacrificed her career advancement to make sure I had opportunities, how Preston's family connections opened doors." He paused. "It's all lies, Dad." I started to speak, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish. I know what you've been doing. I've known for 3 years. My stomach tightened. "Trevor, I was just trying to help without getting in the way of your life with your mom and Preston." "I found the emails," he said. "Junior year, I was helping Professor Hendricks organize her files, and I saw the recommendation you sent about me. It was signed from facilities management, but I recognized your writing style. You use semicolons the same weird way you always did when you'd help me edit my papers." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through something, then turned it toward me. On the screen was a scanned document, one of the emails Dean Blackwood had shown me earlier. "I started looking after that," Trevor continued. "Asked questions, did some digging in the financial aid office when I was working my work-study job there, found the scholarship fund with your name attached, found the tuition waiver, found all of it." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I knew you didn't want credit," he said simply. "You've never wanted credit. Even when I was a kid, you'd help me build something amazing, and then you'd tell me to present it at school like I'd done it myself. You always stayed in the background." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "But Dad, I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm tired of watching Mom take credit for work she didn't do while you hide in the corners. So I did something about it." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What did you do?" Trevor reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila folder, much thicker than the one Dean Blackwood had shown me. He slid it across the table. "My senior thesis," he said. "The one that got published in the Journal of Applied Mechanics. The one Mom keeps telling reporters was inspired by her encouragement and Preston's engineering connections." I opened the folder. The first page was the title page of his thesis. "Structural Integrity in Low-Resource Environments. Innovative Solutions Using Limited Materials." Below the title was the dedication. "For my father, who taught me that constraints inspire creativity, and that the most elegant solutions often come from the simplest tools." My throat tightened as I read it. "Keep going," Trevor said. I turned the page. The acknowledgments section was longer than typical, detailed and specific. It thanked Dean Blackwood for her mentorship, Professor Hendricks for her guidance, and then, in a paragraph that took up half the page, it thanked me. "To Austin Ford, my father, who worked as a custodian at this university to ensure I could attend without debt, who spent his weekends teaching me that every building, every structure, every engineered solution starts with understanding the fundamentals, who showed me through his actions that dignity isn't found in a job title, but in the quality of your work and the integrity of your character. This research exists because he gave me the foundation to dream beyond my circumstances." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly. "That's the version that got published," Trevor said. The journal didn't edit out the personal acknowledgments because I told them it was essential context for understanding my research approach. Every academic who's read that paper knows who you are and what you did. He pulled out another document, this one a letter on official Rhodes Scholarship letterhead. This came last week, he said. My finalist interview is in 2 months. Part of the application process included submitting my thesis and explaining my research methodology. The selection committee specifically mentioned being moved by the dedication. They want to meet you, Dad. They want to understand how a custodian inspired research that's being cited by engineers at MIT. I stared at the letter, at the words swimming on the page. There's more, Trevor said, and now his voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. I also submitted a formal complaint to the University Ethics Board 3 months ago about Mom. My head snapped up. What? She's been claiming on her law firm's website that she personally funded my entire education at Belmont. Uses it as part of her professional biography, evidence of her commitment to education and family values. I have screenshots. She's also been telling clients that Preston's family endowed a scholarship in my name. None of it's true. He pulled out more papers, printed web pages showing Victoria's law firm bio, social media posts, interview excerpts. In each one, she positioned herself as the driving force behind Trevor's success, the devoted mother who spared no expense. The ethics board investigated, Trevor continued. They contacted the financial aid office, reviewed the actual funding sources for my education. They found the same things I found. Your contributions, the employee waiver, Dean Blackwood's discretionary fund. They also found something else. He pulled out one final document, and this one made my blood run cold. It was a financial statement from Holloway Preparatory Academy, the expensive private school Trevor had attended before college. The statement showed payment history for 6 years of tuition, fees, and expenses. But there was a note at the bottom, flagged by the university's investigation. 50% of Holloway Prep tuition paid via court-ordered child support from Austin Ford, allocated directly to educational expenses per Divorce Decree Section 7.3. I read it twice. I paid half your private school tuition? You paid more than half, Trevor said. Mom had the court order written so that your child support went directly to the school. You never saw the invoices, never knew where the money was going. You just knew you had to pay $800 a month. She told everyone she was paying for my education herself, while legally funneling your money to cover the costs. The room tilted slightly. $800 a month for 6 years before college. Almost $58,000. Money I'd scraped together working overtime, taking side jobs, living in the cheapest apartment I could find. Money I'd assumed was going toward Trevor's basic needs, food and clothes and school supplies. Money that had been paying for the elite education Victoria took credit for providing. She committed fraud, I said quietly. Technically, she committed misrepresentation, Trevor corrected. The ethics board's report stops short of calling it fraud, but they've recommended that the university issue a formal correction to any public statements attributing my funding to sources other than the documented ones. They've also forwarded their findings to the State Bar Association, since Mom used false information in her professional marketing. I looked at my son, this young man who'd somehow become smarter and stronger than I'd ever imagined, and I saw something in his eyes I recognized. The same quiet determination I'd felt 6 years ago when I took the custodian job. The same refusal to accept an unjust situation without fighting back. Why didn't you tell me you were doing this? I asked. Because you would have told me not to, he said simply. You would have said it didn't matter, that my success was enough, that you didn't need recognition. But Dad, it's not about you needing recognition. It's about her needing to stop lying, and it's about me needing the world to know who my real hero is. He stood up, walked around the table, and pulled me into a hug. I held on to him, this kid who wasn't a kid anymore, and felt 6 years of invisible weight start to lift. Dean Blackwood is waiting for us at the reception, he said when we pulled apart. She's going to make an announcement. I asked her to. About the real story of how I got here. And I want you standing next to me when she does. We walked across campus together, Trevor still in his graduation robes, me in my outdated suit. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quad, and I could hear the buzz of conversation drifting from the faculty hall. The reception was in full swing. As we approached the building, I could see through the tall windows. The space was packed with graduates and their families, faculty members in their robes, mingling with donors in expensive clothes. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvre. A string quartet played in the corner. This was the Belmont I maintained but never participated in. Trevor noticed my hesitation. "She's going to be in there," he said, probably holding court, telling her version of events. "I know. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I can handle it myself." I looked at him, really looked at him. 22 years old, a published researcher, a Rhodes Scholarship finalist, someone who'd taken the foundation I'd tried to give him and built something remarkable. He didn't need me to fight his battles, but maybe, for once, we could fight one together. "I'm not hiding anymore," I said. We entered through the main doors. The noise of conversation washed over us immediately, that particular sound of successful people celebrating success. Several faculty members saw Trevor and called out congratulations. He smiled, thanked them, kept moving deeper into the crowd. I saw her before she saw me. Victoria stood near the center of the room, surrounded by a small crowd that included 2 people with press badges, a camera operator, and several faculty members I recognized. She was animated, gesturing as she spoke, her expression showing just the right mix of pride and humble gratitude. Preston stood beside her, nodding along, occasionally adding comments. "The key," Victoria was saying as we got close enough to hear, "is consistency. From the time Trevor was young, I made sure he understood that excellence wasn't optional. We enrolled him in the best schools, provided tutors when needed, ensured he had every opportunity to succeed." One of the reporters, a woman in her 30s with a notepad, asked, "And what would you say was the biggest sacrifice you made to support his education?" Victoria paused, as if considering the question carefully. "Honestly, I delayed my partnership track at the firm for several years. I could have made senior partner much earlier, but I chose to prioritize Trevor's needs. Some opportunities you can't get back, but seeing him today wearing that medallion, it was worth every sacrifice." I felt Trevor tense beside me, his hand clenched into a fist. Before either of us could react, Dean Blackwood appeared at our side. She must have been watching for us. "Perfect timing," she said quietly. "Are you ready?" Trevor nodded. I managed to do the same. Dean Blackwood moved through the crowd with practiced ease, people naturally making way for her. She approached Victoria's group, and the conversation paused as people recognized her presence. "Victoria, wonderful to see you," Dean Blackwood said warmly. "I hope you don't mind if I interrupt for just a moment." "Of course not, Dean Blackwood," Victoria said, her smile bright and professional. "We were just discussing Trevor's journey." "Yes, I heard," the dean said. "Actually, that's why I wanted to join you. I thought your conversation could benefit from some additional context." She turned to the reporters. "I don't believe you've met Trevor's father yet." Victoria's smile froze. Her eyes found me in the crowd, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, definitely, but also calculation, trying to figure out what was happening and how to control it. "Austin," she said, recovering quickly. "I didn't know you were attending the reception." "Dean Blackwood invited me," I said simply. Preston stepped forward, extending his hand in that automatic way powerful men have. "Preston Whitmore, I don't think we formally met." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, practiced, the handshake of someone who'd been networking since prep school. "Austin Ford." The reporter with the notepad looked between us, sensing a story shifting shape. "Mr. Ford, you're Trevor's father?" "I am." "And you work here at the university?" "I'm the head custodian," I said. "Have been for 6 years." I saw Victoria's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. She knew where this was going now, but she was trapped by social convention and the presence of reporters. She couldn't leave without looking guilty, couldn't contradict me without seeming defensive. "Actually," Dean Blackwood said, her voice carrying enough authority that nearby conversations quieted, people turning to listen. "I wanted to take this opportunity to clarify something about Trevor's education here at Belmont. There seems to be some confusion in the public narrative." More people were gathering now, forming a loose circle around us. I saw faculty members I recognized, donors whose names were on buildings, other graduates and their families. Trevor moved to stand beside me, a united front. "Trevor's success," the dean continued, "is certainly the result of his own brilliant mind and incredible work ethic. But the support system that made his education possible deserves accurate recognition. Trevor attended Belmont tuition-free through an employee-dependent waiver. His father, Austin, took a position with our facilities management team specifically to secure that benefit for his son. The reporter was writing quickly. The camera operator had turned his lens toward us. Victoria interjected, her voice still smooth but with an edge underneath. Of course, Austin contributed what he could. We both supported Trevor in our own ways. I handled the majority of his expenses, his private school education before college, his living costs, all the additional opportunities that aren't covered by tuition waivers. That's interesting, Trevor said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm, but I could hear the steel in it. Because I have the financial records right here. He pulled out his phone, and I realized he'd prepared for this moment. He'd known exactly how it would unfold. Holloway prep tuition, Trevor said, reading from his screen. 60% paid through court-ordered child support from Austin Ford, routed directly to the school. An additional 20% covered by financial aid I qualified for based on Dad's income level. The remaining 20% split between you and Preston's family. Victoria's face flushed. Trevor, this isn't the time or place to discuss private financial matters. You made them public matters when you built your professional brand around false claims, Trevor said. Your law firm's website says you personally funded my entire education. Your social media posts claim Preston's family endowed a scholarship in my name. The University Ethics Board investigated these claims. Would you like me to share their findings? The circle around us had grown larger. Everyone was listening now. The string quartet still playing in the background, but no one paying attention to it anymore. Preston put his hand on Victoria's shoulder, a gesture probably meant to be supportive, but that looked more like restraint. Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately. No, Trevor said firmly. This has been private for 6 years. It's time for the truth to be public. Dean Blackwood, who had orchestrated this entire confrontation with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra, spoke again. For the record, and for the benefit of our media guests, I want to state clearly that Trevor Caldwell Whitmore's education at Belmont Technical Institute was made possible primarily through his father's employment benefits, his father's voluntary salary contributions to a supplementary scholarship fund, and university merit aid. Additional support came from the Blackwood Discretionary Fund, which I personally allocated because I believed Trevor's potential warranted investment. She paused, letting that sink in, then continued. Furthermore, the letter of recommendation that was cited by the Rhodes Scholarship Committee as particularly compelling was based on 6 years of observations shared with me by Austin Ford, who watched his son grow into an exceptional scholar while maintaining the campus where that growth occurred. The reporter turned to me. Mr. Ford, did you know your son was going to bring this up today? No, I said honestly. I've tried to stay out of his way, let him build his own life without complications from the divorce. But you worked here for 6 years specifically so he could attend college debt-free? Yes. And you contributed 15% of your salary to cover his additional expenses? I did what any parent would do. Made sure my son had what he needed to succeed. Victoria found her voice again, trying to regain control. This is a beautiful story of co-parenting, she said, attempting to reframe the narrative. Both of us contributed in our own ways. Austin through his employment benefits, and I through direct financial support and guidance. Mom, Trevor said, and his voice carried a disappointment that cut deeper than anger could have. Stop, just stop lying. The room went completely silent. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. I spent 3 months documenting every false claim you've made, Trevor continued. Every interview where you took sole credit. Every social media post implying you sacrificed your career. Every professional bio that erased Dad's contributions. I have screenshots, financial records, sworn statements from the Financial Aid Office. The State Bar Association has all of it now. Victoria went pale. You reported me to the bar? The University Ethics Board forwarded their findings, Trevor said. I just made sure they had complete information. Using false claims in professional marketing is a violation of professional conduct rules. You know that, you're a lawyer. Preston stepped back slightly, a small movement but noticeable. Distancing himself, I realized. Protecting his own reputation. The reporter was still writing, and I knew this story was going to be published. The narrative Victoria had carefully constructed was crumbling in real time in front of witnesses, on camera. Dean Blackwood placed a gentle hand on Trevor's shoulder. "I think we've provided sufficient context," she said. "The accurate record has been established. How people choose to move forward from here is their own decision." She looked at Victoria with an expression that wasn't quite sympathy, but something close to it. "I'm sure you understand, Victoria, that the university has an obligation to correct any misattributions regarding our scholarship and funding programs. We'll be issuing a clarification statement within the week." Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked toward the exit. Preston hesitated for a moment, looked at Trevor as if he wanted to say something, then followed her. The crowd parted to let them through. The camera operator lowered his equipment. The reporter approached me with her notepad. "Mr. Ford, would you be willing to do a full interview? I think our readers would love to hear more about your story." I looked at Trevor. He nodded encouragingly. "Maybe," I said. "But today is about Trevor and his accomplishment. That's what should be the focus." Dean Blackwood smiled, a genuine expression of approval. "Well said. Now, Trevor, I believe there are several professors who want to discuss your thesis with you. And Austin, I'd like you to meet some of our board members. It's time they knew who really keeps this university running." The reception continued around us, but the energy had shifted. Conversations that had been light and celebratory now carried an undercurrent of tension and gossip. I could feel eyes on me, people reassessing who I was and what my presence meant. The invisible custodian had suddenly become visible, and not everyone seemed comfortable with that change. Dean Blackwood guided Trevor and me toward a group of older individuals standing near the windows. Their clothes were expensive, their posture confident. Board members, the people who made decisions about the university's future, and held the real power behind the academic facade. "Everyone," Dean Blackwood said as we approached, "I'd like you to meet Austin Ford. Austin has been with our facilities management team for 6 years, and more importantly, he's Trevor's father." A woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes extended her hand first. "Margaret Chen, board chair. Dean Blackwood has told us quite a bit about you over the years." I shook her hand, surprised by the warmth in her grip. "She has?" "Indeed," another board member said, a distinguished black man in an impeccable suit. "Robert Hayes, Finance Committee. Patricia has been advocating for expanded employee education benefits for some time. Your story has been part of that advocacy, though she kept your identity confidential." Dean Blackwood gave me a slight smile. "Employee-dependent tuition waivers exist because they work. Austin's commitment to ensuring his son could attend Belmont debt-free is exactly the kind of investment we should be supporting institutionally." Margaret Chen nodded. "We've actually been discussing a proposal to expand the program. Current employees can only use the benefit for dependents, but we're considering allowing employees themselves to complete degrees while working here. Patricia suggested we call it the Ford Initiative." I felt my face flush. "That's not necessary." "It's entirely necessary," Dean Blackwood said firmly. "You had to abandon your architecture degree to support your family. You're not the only talented person working in facilities or dining services or campus security who had to postpone their education due to life circumstances. This university should be helping people like you finish what they started." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. I pulled it out, intending to silence it, but saw multiple notifications stacking up. Text messages, missed calls, social media alerts. I opened the first text, from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this the Austin Ford from the Belmont graduation story? Channel 7 would like to interview you." Another text, different number. "Mr. Ford, I'm a reporter with the State Journal. Can we discuss your son's education and your role at Belmont?" I scrolled through more messages, my stomach tightening. The story was spreading fast, faster than I'd anticipated. Someone at the reception must have posted about the confrontation, or the reporter had already filed her story online. Trevor was looking at his phone too, his expression complicated. "Dad, you're trending on social media. What does that mean?" He turned his screen toward me. There was a video, shaky footage clearly shot on someone's phone, showing the moment when Dean Blackwood introduced me and Trevor revealed the financial records. The caption read, "Custodian father exposes ex-wife's lies about son's education. This is what real sacrifice looks like." The video had been posted 20 minutes ago and already had over 50,000 views. There's more, Trevor said, scrolling. Someone found Mom's law firm bio and posted screenshots comparing her claims to the actual financial records I released. People are calling her office. Margaret Chen leaned over to look at Trevor's phone, then exchanged a glance with Robert Hayes. This is going to get complicated, she said quietly. She was right. Over the next hour, as the reception slowly wound down and graduates began leaving with their families, the full scope of what we'd set in motion became clear. Victoria's law firm's website went offline, presumably to remove or edit her biography. Preston's Family Foundation issued a terse statement clarifying that while they supported educational initiatives, they had not endowed any scholarship in Trevor's name. My phone kept buzzing. Interview requests, messages of support from people I'd never met, a few angry messages from people who thought I was trying to embarrass my ex-wife publicly. That last group wasn't entirely wrong. Dean Blackwood eventually rescued me from the board members, suggesting that Trevor and I might want some privacy to process everything. She led us to her office, a comfortable space with leather chairs and walls lined with books. She closed the door, muffling the noise from the hallway. Sit, she said, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. Both of you. We sat. She moved to a small cabinet in the corner and pulled out 3 bottles of water, handing them to us before settling into her own chair. That was messier than I anticipated, she admitted. I thought we'd make a quiet correction to the record, maybe get a small article in the local paper. I didn't expect it to explode quite so dramatically. It's my fault, Trevor said. I shouldn't have confronted her so directly. I just got angry watching her perform for the cameras. You had every right to be angry, Dean Blackwood said, but anger and strategy don't always mix well. What's done is done. Now we need to think about what comes next. She pulled out her own phone and showed us a news alert. The State Bar Association has issued a statement. They're opening an investigation into Victoria Caldwell Whitmore's professional conduct, specifically regarding the accuracy of her marketing materials and public statements. My stomach dropped. I never wanted to destroy her career. You didn't, Dean Blackwood said firmly. She built her professional brand on false claims. That's not your responsibility, it's hers. The Bar Association takes misrepresentation seriously, especially when it involves something as sensitive as educational funding and family dynamics. Trevor was quiet, staring at his water bottle. She's going to hate me for this. She might, I said, but Trevor, you didn't do anything wrong. You told the truth. I humiliated her in public, in front of reporters and her colleagues and Preston's family. That's not just truth-telling, Dad. That's revenge. The word hung in the air between us. He wasn't wrong. What we'd done at the reception wasn't just about correcting the record. It was about making Victoria face consequences she'd avoided for 6 years. Dean Blackwood leaned forward. Trevor, let me tell you something I've learned in 30 years of university administration. The truth isn't revenge. It's justice. Your mother made choices, calculated choices, to erase your father's contributions and claim sole credit for your success. She did it for professional gain, for social status, for reasons that served her interests. Exposing those lies isn't revenge. It's simply refusing to participate in the fiction she created. She turned to me. Austin, you've spent 6 years being invisible, letting her control the narrative because you thought it was better for Trevor. But children don't benefit from watching one parent diminish the other through lies. They benefit from seeing both parents behave with integrity, even when it's difficult. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from a number with a local area code. I let it go to voicemail, but Dean Blackwood noticed. You're going to need to decide how to handle the media attention, she said. My advice? Choose one reputable outlet, give them a full interview, and then politely decline other requests. Control your narrative before someone else does it for you. Trevor's phone rang. He looked at the screen and went pale. It's Mom. We all stared at his phone as it continued to ring. On the 4th ring, he answered, putting it on speaker. Trevor. Victoria's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fury underneath. What you did today was unforgivable. I told the truth, Trevor said, his voice steadier than I expected. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues, in front of Preston's family, in front of reporters. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to my reputation? Do you have any idea what your lies did to Dad? Trevor shot back. He spent 6 years working as a custodian so I could go to college, And you've spent 6 years pretending he didn't exist. You built your professional brand on erasing him. How is that fair? There was a pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was colder. I gave you everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, connections that will serve you for the rest of your life. And this is how you repay me? You gave me some things, Trevor said, but Dad gave me the foundation everything else was built on. You just never wanted anyone to know that. Is he there with you? Victoria asked. Is Austin listening to this? Trevor looked at me. I nodded. Yes, Trevor said. He's here. Dean Blackwood, too. Another pause, longer this time. Of course she is. The dean who decided to destroy my reputation at my son's graduation reception. How professional. Dean Blackwood spoke up, her voice calm and measured. Victoria, I didn't destroy your reputation. I corrected a false narrative. There's a difference. If you'd like to discuss the university's position on this matter, I'm happy to schedule a formal meeting. But I won't debate it over your son's phone. There's nothing to debate, Victoria said. I'm contacting my attorney. What happened today was defamation, and I will be seeking legal remedy. Good luck with that, Dean Blackwood said. Every statement made at the reception was factually accurate and documented. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation. But please, do consult your attorney. I'm sure they'll explain that to you. The line went dead. Victoria had hung up. Trevor set his phone on the desk, his hand shaking slightly. She's really going to sue? She might threaten to, Dean Blackwood said. But actually filing a defamation suit would require her to prove that false statements were made with malicious intent. Since everything said today was true and documented, any competent attorney will advise her not to proceed. It would only generate more negative publicity. She stood and walked to her window, looking out over the campus. What will happen is this. Victoria will do damage control. She'll issue some kind of statement, probably something about misunderstandings or co-parenting challenges. Preston's family will distance themselves quietly. Her law firm will likely suggest she take a sabbatical while the bar investigation proceeds, and eventually, this will fade from public attention. She turned back to us. But the truth will remain on the record. That's what matters. Trevor's achievements will be properly attributed to all the people who made them possible, including his father who sacrificed his own career to ensure his son didn't start adult life buried in debt. I felt the weight of 6 years beginning to lift, but it was replaced by something else. Uncertainty about what came next, about how to navigate a world where I was no longer invisible. What do I do now? I asked. Dean Blackwood smiled. You keep being exactly who you've always been. A father who showed up, did the work, and asked for nothing in return. That's not going to change, just because people finally know about it. The days after graduation moved both too fast and too slow. The story spread beyond local news, picked up by regional outlets and then national ones. Custodian father's secret sacrifice became a headline template repeated across dozens of websites. My face, captured in that shaky phone video from the reception, became recognizable to strangers. I gave one interview, as Dean Blackwood suggested, to a journalist from the State Journal who seemed genuinely interested in the broader issues around educational access and employee benefits. I kept it focused on the facts, avoiding any dramatic characterizations of Victoria as a villain or myself as a hero. The truth was complicated enough without embellishment. Victoria, as predicted, issued a statement through her law firm. It was carefully worded, acknowledging that various family members contributed to Trevor's educational journey in different ways, and expressing pride in his achievements. It didn't admit to any wrongdoing, but it also stopped short of defending her previous claims. The bar investigation was ongoing, but her firm had quietly removed her from their website's leadership page. Preston filed for separation 2 weeks after graduation. Trevor told me about it during one of our weekend dinners, a tradition we'd maintained for 6 years that suddenly felt different now that everything was out in the open. We were at the same diner we'd always gone to, cheap coffee and decent burgers, nothing fancy. Preston said he couldn't be associated with the scandal. Trevor explained, picking at his fries. His family has a reputation to protect. Apparently, being connected to someone under bar investigation doesn't fit their brand. How's your mom handling it? I asked. Trevor shrugged. She won't talk to me. I've tried calling a few times, but she doesn't answer. Her assistant told me she's taking some time away from work to focus on personal matters. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Satisfaction that Victoria was facing consequences for her lies, yes, but also something like pity. She'd built an impressive career, had genuinely worked hard to become a successful attorney, but she'd compromised it all by needing to claim credit she hadn't earned. "Do you regret it?" I asked, confronting her at the reception. Trevor thought about it, really thought about it. "Sometimes. When I can't sleep and I think about how everything exploded, but then I remember watching you stand against that wall in the auditorium, trying to be invisible at your own son's graduation, and no, I don't regret making sure people knew the truth." He looked at me across the table. "You taught me that integrity matters more than comfort." I was just applying the lesson. 2 months later, I stood in Dean Blackwood's office again, but this time the conversation was about my future rather than my past. "The board approved the Ford initiative," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Starting next semester, any university employee who's been here for at least 2 years can enroll in degree programs tuition-free. They'll need to maintain full-time employment and make satisfactory academic progress, but we're removing the barriers that prevented people like you from finishing what they started." I opened the folder. Inside was an application for readmission to Belmont's architecture program, partially filled out with my information from 15 years ago. "Your credits from your previous university will transfer," Dean Blackwood continued. "Based on our assessment, you'd need approximately 60 more credits to complete your degree. At a normal course load while working full-time, that's about 3 years." "I'll be 45 years old when I graduate," I said. "Yes," she agreed, "and you'll be 45 whether you get the degree or not. The question is which version of 45 you want to be." I stared at the application, at the ghost of the person I'd been at 23, before marriage and fatherhood and divorce had rerouted my life. Architecture had been my passion once. Could it be again? "Think about it," Dean Blackwood said. "No pressure. But Austin, you've spent 6 years helping your son achieve his dreams. Maybe it's time to resurrect some of your own." That evening, I brought the application to dinner with Trevor. We'd moved to a slightly nicer restaurant now, his treat, celebrating the research grant he'd received for his Rhodes Scholarship preparation. He was leaving in 3 months for Oxford, beginning the next chapter of his life. "You should do it," he said immediately when I showed him the application. "Dad, you should absolutely do it." "I'm too old to be a student again." "You're never too old to finish something you started," he countered. "Isn't that what you always told me? That giving up is the only real failure?" He wasn't wrong. I'd said exactly that, multiple times, when he was struggling with difficult classes or doubting himself. "It would mean 3 more years working as a custodian while taking classes," I said. 3 more years of tight budgets and long hours." 3 years working towards something you actually wanted for yourself, Trevor corrected. "Not just for me or anyone else. For you." I looked at the application, at the blank spaces waiting to be filled with information about who I was now and who I wanted to become. 42 years old, a custodian with an unfinished degree, and a son who'd just become famous for revealing that his father's sacrifices had been systematically erased from the narrative of his success. Not the trajectory I'd imagined at 23, but maybe not a bad starting point for 42. "Okay," I said, "I'll do it." Trevor grinned, that same expression he'd had as a kid when he successfully completed a difficult Lego set. "Good. And Dad? When you graduate, I'm giving a speech about you. Fair warning." I laughed. "Let's get through your time at Oxford first. Then we can worry about my graduation." But the application sat on my kitchen table that night, and the next morning, I filled it out. Carefully, honestly explaining the 15-year gap in my education and what I'd been doing during that time. I attached the required documents, wrote a brief essay about why I wanted to return to architecture, and submitted it before I could second-guess myself. The acceptance letter came 3 weeks later. I was readmitted to Belmont's architecture program, starting in the fall semester. My advisor was Professor James Mitchell, a man in his 60s who'd been teaching architecture theory since before I was born. Our first meeting was in his office, a cluttered space filled with building models and rolled blueprints. He looked over my transcript from 15 years ago, then looked at me. "You had strong grades before you left," he said. "What happened?" "Life," I answered. "Marriage, fatherhood, responsibilities that didn't leave room for finishing a degree." He nodded. "And now?" "Now my son's at Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship. The responsibilities that made me stop are the same ones that are making me start again. I want him to see that it's never too late to go back for what matters." Professor Mitchell smiled. Good answer. Welcome back, Mr. Ford. Let's see if we can turn you into an architect. The semester started in August. I took 2 classes, Introduction to Sustainable Design and Architectural History 2, both evening courses that fit around my work schedule. Walking into those classrooms felt surreal. Sitting among students half my age, pulling out notebooks, and trying to remember how to take lecture notes. But something unexpected happened. The younger students didn't treat me like an outsider or an oddity. If anything, they were curious, asking questions about my work maintaining campus buildings, interested in the practical knowledge I'd gained from 6 years of understanding how structures actually functioned day to day. In sustainable design, my first project was to analyze an existing building on campus and propose improvements to its energy efficiency. I chose the engineering library, the building where Trevor and I had spent so many weekends, and my analysis included observations from actually maintaining that building for years. The professor gave me the highest grade in the class. You understand something most architecture students don't learn until they're actually working in the field, he wrote in his feedback. Buildings aren't just theoretical exercises. They're living systems that need to work for real people in real conditions. Your practical experience is an asset, not a liability. I sent a photo of the graded project to Trevor at Oxford. He responded immediately, "Told you so, proud of you, Dad." Those 3 words meant more than any grade. The fall semester passed, then winter break, then spring semester. I took 2 more classes, pushed through long nights of homework after even longer days of work. My coworkers in facilities management thought I was crazy, going back to school at my age, but they also started asking questions about the Ford Initiative, about whether they might use the benefit themselves. Marcus, one of the younger maintenance workers who'd been dreaming of becoming a civil engineer, submitted his application in February. He was accepted for the fall semester. "You made this possible," he told me, "just by doing it yourself first." I didn't feel like I'd made anything possible. I was just trying to finish something I'd started 15 years ago, trying to prove to myself and my son that giving up wasn't permanent unless you let it be. Trevor came home for the summer before his second year at Oxford. He looked different, more mature, his accent carrying slight British inflections he probably didn't even notice. We fell back into our weekend dinner routine, catching up on his research in my classes. "Mom reached out," he said one evening over coffee. "She wants to have lunch next week, talk about things." I set down my cup carefully. "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous," he admitted, "but also ready. It's been almost a year, we can't avoid each other forever, and honestly, I miss her, even with everything that happened." "She's still your mother," I said. "What happened at graduation doesn't change that. You can love her, and still have been right to tell the truth." "Did you ever stop loving her?" he asked. "After the divorce, after everything?" I thought about it, really considered the question. I stopped being in love with her. But I never stopped caring about her well-being or hoping she'd be successful and happy. Those are different things. Trevor nodded slowly. "Would you want to see her?" if she asked. "If you need me there, I will be. But Trevor, you and your mom need to rebuild your relationship on your own terms. I can't be part of that process. It wouldn't be fair to any of us." The lunch happened without me. Trevor came by my apartment afterward, looking emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter. "She apologized," he said. "For lying, for taking credit, for all of it. She said she got caught up in trying to prove something to Preston's family, to her firm, to everyone. That she lost sight of what actually mattered. Do you believe her?" "I think I do. She's in therapy now, working through some stuff about her own childhood and her need for external validation. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it helps explain it." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. Victoria and Trevor at lunch, both smiling, but with a carefulness that suggested they were still rebuilding trust. "She asked about you," Trevor said. "How you're doing, how school is going. I think she wants to apologize to you too, eventually." "She doesn't owe me an apology," I said. "We're divorced. We both made choices. What matters is that you have a relationship with both your parents, and that nobody's lying about who contributed what to your success." Trevor hugged me then, unprompted and tight. "Thank you for never making me choose sides, even when it would have been easier to." I held my son, this remarkable young man who'd somehow learned to demand truth without destroying relationships, to seek justice without sacrificing compassion. If I'd contributed nothing else to his development, teaching him that complexity was worth navigating had been enough. 3 years passed faster than I expected. The rhythm of work and school became second nature, early mornings cleaning buildings followed by evenings in classrooms, weekends buried in drafting projects and structural calculations. My apartment remained small, my truck still barely passed inspection, but something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't just maintaining other people's buildings anymore. I was learning to design my own. Trevor finished his time at Oxford with distinction, his research on structural integrity in resource-limited environments earning recognition from engineering communities across Europe. He accepted a position with an architectural firm in Boston, one that specialized in sustainable design for developing regions. The work aligned perfectly with everything he'd learned, everything we'd discussed during those weekend dinners over cheap burgers and cheaper coffee. My own graduation came on a bright May morning, 14 years after I'd first enrolled in architecture school, and 3 years after I'd returned to finish what I'd started. The ceremony was smaller than Trevor's had been, just the architecture and engineering departments combined, but Dean Blackwood insisted on attending. I wore the same navy suit, now truly outdated but it still fit. Trevor flew in from Boston, taking 2 days off work to be there. We met for breakfast before the ceremony at the same diner where we'd spent so many Saturday mornings. "Nervous?" he asked, pushing a plate of pancakes toward me that I hadn't ordered but somehow appeared anyway. "A little," I admitted. "I'm the oldest person graduating today, by at least 15 years. You're also the person who proved that the Ford Initiative actually works," Trevor countered. 6 other employees have graduated since you started. Marcus finished his civil engineering degree last semester. You didn't just go back to school for yourself, Dad. You made it possible for other people to believe they could do it too. The ceremony began at 10. I sat with the other architecture graduates, most of them in their early 20s, full of excitement about their futures. They'd been kind to me over the past 3 years, including me in study groups and project collaborations, without making me feel like the old guy trying to recapture his youth. When they called my name, Austin Ford, Bachelor of Architecture, I walked across that stage and shook Dean Blackwood's hand. The applause was genuine, not just polite. I saw Trevor in the front row, standing and cheering like I'd done at his graduation 3 years ago. But this time, I wasn't hiding against the back wall. I was center stage, claiming an achievement that belonged to me. After the ceremony, Dean Blackwood found me in the crowd of celebrating graduates and families. "A moment of your time?" she asked. We stepped away to a quieter corner of the quad. She pulled an envelope from her jacket pocket and handed it to me. "What's this?" I asked. "An offer letter," she said. "The university is expanding our facilities management division to include a sustainability and design coordinator position. Someone who understands both the theoretical principles of efficient building design and the practical realities of maintaining aging structures. The job is yours if you want it." I opened the envelope, scanned the letter. The salary was nearly double what I currently made as head custodian. The title was Facilities Design Coordinator. The responsibilities included overseeing renovations, planning new construction projects, and managing the university's long-term infrastructure sustainability goals. "This is an administrative position," I said slowly. "I'd have an office." "You'd have an office, a team, and the authority to actually implement the ideas you've been suggesting in maintenance reports for 6 years, Dean Blackwood said. "I've read every single one, Austin. Your observations about building inefficiencies, your proposals for improvements, they were always more sophisticated than what we typically get from facility staff. Now you have the credentials to back up that expertise officially." I stared at the letter, at this opportunity that represented everything I'd worked toward. Not just a degree, but a career that combined my education with my experience, that validated both the dreams I'd had at 23 and the practical knowledge I'd gained in the years since. "I accept," I said. Dean Blackwood smiled. "Good. You start in 2 weeks. That gives you time to train your replacement as head custodian and move into your new role." Trevor appeared then, having navigated through the crowd to find us. He saw the envelope in my hand, looked at Dean Blackwood's expression, and grinned. "You offered him the job," he said to the dean. "I did. He accepted." Trevor pulled me into a hug. "See? I told you finishing the degree would change everything." But he was wrong about that, I realized as I held my son and looked around at the campus I'd helped maintain for nearly a decade. The degree hadn't changed everything. It had just made visible what had always been true. That the work I'd been doing mattered. That the knowledge I'd been accumulating had value. That starting over wasn't admitting defeat, but choosing growth. We had dinner that night, Trevor and Dean Blackwood and I, at a restaurant nicer than any I'd have chosen for myself. The dean insisted on paying, calling it a celebration of the Ford Initiative's first graduate and newest administrator. "What's next?" she asked over dessert. "Now that you've finished your degree and have a career that actually uses it?" I thought about the question. For so long, my life had been defined by what I was working toward: Trevor's education, my own degree, basic survival and stability. Now those goals were achieved. What came after achievement? "I want to design something," I said slowly. "Something permanent. A building that will still be standing 50 years from now, that will serve people I'll never meet." That was always the dream. "Then make it happen," Dean Blackwood said simply. "You have the credentials, the experience, and now the position to propose projects. The university is planning a new student center. Submit a design." Trevor raised his glass. "To new beginnings and old dreams, may they both lead somewhere worth going." We clinked glasses, and I felt something settle inside me that had been restless for 14 years. Not contentment exactly, but purpose. The sense that my life was finally moving in a direction I'd chosen, rather than one circumstances had forced upon me. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, on the 3rd floor of the administration building, the same building I'd cleaned for years, and looked at the architectural drawings spread across my desk. My proposal for the new student center, incorporating sustainable design principles and practical maintenance considerations, innovations born from understanding buildings both theoretically and intimately. The proposal had been accepted. Construction would begin in the spring. And somewhere on that building, small enough that most people would never notice it, would be a cornerstone, engraved with the names of everyone who'd contributed to its design. My name would be on that stone, not hidden, not diminished, not erased. Just there, permanent and true, proof that the custodian who'd once cleaned these halls had learned to design them instead. Trevor called that evening, his regular check-in from Boston. "How's the design coming?" "Good," I said. "Really good. I think Dad would have been proud." "He would have been," Trevor agreed. "But more importantly, are you proud?" I looked at the drawings, at the office that finally felt like it belonged to me, at the reflection in the window showing a man who'd fought his way back to his own dreams without abandoning his responsibilities. "Yeah," I said, "I am." And for the first time in 14 years, that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.